This program is presented by the Associated General Contractors of America.
The beauty of a good scaffold setup is that it's solid. When it's properly constructed, it's not going anywhere. But that's also a disadvantage when the job you're doing requires access to different locations. If you're working on a surface where wheels can be used, mobile scaffold can be a great option. It can be built from standard scaffold sections, giving you a lot of control over working height, size of the work platform, and access. But its biggest advantage is mobility. Rather than build a large fixed scaffold or set up and take down a smaller one several times, you can just roll it from place to place. This portability can really increase your efficiency, but it has some limitations and also introduces a few hazards of its own. To stay safe, you have to know where you can use it, how to set it up, and how to work with it correctly. Mobile scaffold needs a solid level surface for stability.
Because of the wheels, this usually means a finished floor, concrete slab, or asphalt that's free from pits, holes, or obstructions that would make it difficult to move. It needs rigid construction, preferably with the addition of lateral bracing to keep it square when it's getting moved around. Solid walking and working surfaces, safe access, and fall protection for heights greater than 10 feet. This means guardrails or a personal fall arrest system.
When planning your project, remember that mobile scaffold requires the same height-to-base ratio as frame scaffolding.
This is 4:1 for most states. Beyond this, a conventional scaffold has to be tied off to a supporting structure, but because a mobile scaffold is, by definition, freestanding, there's a practical limit to how high you can go.
Most manufacturers have outriggers or extra wide base frames that will allow you to increase the height slightly, but you still have to maintain that 4:1 ratio. The next consideration is how much load you anticipate putting on the scaffold. Usually we look at the load capacity of the frame and planks. Now, on mobile scaffold, the wheels are also a limiting factor. Usually the load rating is stamped right on the wheel. If it isn't, consult the manufacturer's specifications and make sure you don't exceed the total capacity of all the wheels.
Also, plan for a comfortable working height and select frames that will allow you to build a work platform as close to that height as possible so you can avoid bending over or stretching.
When you're sure you can reach the height you need safely, with a comfortable work platform that'll handle the weight of the workers, equipment, and materials, you can start assembling the components. First, check the wheels to make sure they can turn freely in every direction and that the brake is working. If a wheel sticks or is obviously damaged, don't use it. It's easier to put the wheels on first.
Lay the frames on the floor, insert the wheels, secure each one with a locking pin, and have one person hold a frame upright while the other starts to fasten the cross braces. Make sure each brace is fully seated on the stud and the locking mechanism is in place. When both sets of cross braces have been attached, the frame will support itself while you fasten the braces on the opposite frame. This is the time to install lateral or diagonal bracing. Square up the frames and fasten the brace to opposite corners. Lateral or diagonal bracing will keep the scaffold from racking when it's being moved. If you're building the scaffold more than one frame high, give yourself something secure to stand on for the second lift, at least 2 wooden scaffold planks or a wide aluminum plank. While you're erecting or dismantling a scaffold, it's legal to climb the horizontal bars on the frame as long as they're not more than 22 inches apart vertically.
This isn't the safest or easiest access, and it doesn't meet the requirements for anyone on the finished scaffold. For that, you need rungs that are no more than 16 3/4 inches apart. If you use frames with an integrated ladder or attached ladder sections, you'll save yourself time and have safe access for both erection and use. Oh, and climbing the cross braces, never an option.
You can stage your materials for the next lift by laying the cross braces between the frames and hanging the next set of frames on opposite corners of the uprights so you can reach them easily without leaning over the scaffold. Go around and lock all of the wheels before you mount the scaffold. When you're in position, connect the end frames and lock them in place with the manufacturer's hardware. Don't try to attach the cross braces from the middle of the scaffold. For added stability, stand near the end frame and support the cross braces on the opposite frame as you attach them. For your work platform, you can use aluminum planks, manufactured plywood planking, scaffold grade 2x10s, or equivalent planks selected by the competent person.
When we talk about a competent person, we mean someone who has had specific training and experience with scaffold systems, who's capable of identifying existing and predictable hazards, and who has the authority to take prompt corrective action if there's a hazard present.
Planks take a lot of abuse, so remember to inspect them before each use. If a plank has deep checks, saw kerfs, or other signs of damage, put it aside until a competent person can decide if it's still safe to use. Your work platform should be decked completely so you can't accidentally step between planks or have tools or materials fall through the deck. And no part of the platform should extend beyond the base supports. Generally, this means keeping it within the uprights of the frame.
There are brackets that will allow a deck to be built beyond the frame width, but most manufacturers don't recommend them for mobile scaffolds, even if they are offset with outriggers at the base. Anytime you're considering an extra wide deck, it must be done under the supervision of a competent person, conform to the manufacturer's recommendations, and not extend beyond the wheels. If you're working 10 feet or more above the floor, you must have some form of fall protection. But consider this. A deck on the top of a full-height scaffold frame is over 6 feet off the ground. That's a significant fall to a guaranteed hard surface. So, even if you're only going 1 frame high, fall protection's a good idea.
Your primary form of fall protection on a mobile scaffold is a guardrail system consisting of uprights, guardrails, mid-rails, and toe boards. Typically, you will use the manufacturer's modular system. Uprights fit on the frames and are secured with locking pins. Most manufacturers have special end frames that will give you access to the work platform without having to climb through the guardrails. Guardrails and mid-rails attach to the uprights, and each manufacturer has a fastening device to keep them secure. You also need a toe board to keep tools and materials from slipping over the edge. It needs to be at least a 1x4, fastened securely to the uprights.
Where a guardrail system isn't possible or is incomplete, you have to use a personal fall arrest system. This system should be approved by the competent person with special attention given to your anchorage. The lanyard must be attached to an appropriate structural member. Under no circumstances can a personal fall arrest system be tied off to the mobile scaffold itself. If you fall, you don't want to pull the scaffold over on top of yourself.
Before using the scaffold, give it a thorough inspection. In particular, make sure that all of the components, wheels, frames, braces, and the guardrail system, are locked together. When you're moving the scaffold into position, be aware of obstructions, both on the ground and overhead.
Power lines and electrical wiring are a major concern. You don't want to accidentally run into them, and if you must work near them, you have to maintain a minimum safe distance for the scaffold and any conductive material you might be handling.
That means at least 3 feet for insulated wiring under 300 volts and 10 feet for uninsulated wiring or high voltage lines. The competent person should determine the appropriate clearance for your situation. Before you get on the scaffold, first, lock down all the wheels. Don't carry materials up with you. Instead, have someone hand or hoist them up to you. Besides not overloading the scaffold, try to distribute the weight so that you don't introduce point loads or make the scaffold unbalanced. And be alert for weak planks. Fully loaded, the plank should deflect less than 1.5 inches in a 7-foot span or 2 inches in a 10-foot span.
While you're working, don't stand on boxes, ladders, or planks laid across the mid-rail. This is a flexible system. The idea is to build a working platform at the height you need. As much as possible, keep your work within the area of the scaffold platform. If you find yourself leaning or reaching too far over the guardrail, it's time to move. Remember, this is a mobile scaffold. Because of the potential hazards involved, it's strongly recommended that everyone get off the scaffold before moving it, and make sure materials and equipment are either secured or removed so they can't fall off and injure someone below.
To move it by hand, push. Don't pull the scaffold as close to the base as possible, but not above 5 feet. Any situation which requires a worker to ride the scaffold while it's being moved should be carefully reviewed by the competent person. Because of the hazards involved, OSHA has strict guidelines regulating this type of use. First, the height-to-base ratio is much smaller, a maximum of 2 to 1. The surface on which the scaffold is being moved must be within 3 degrees of level and free of holes or bumps that could be jarring and cause someone to fall. The scaffold needs to be balanced, with its weight evenly distributed. In particular, if outriggers are being used, they have to be installed on both sides of the scaffold. If you're on the scaffold, don't try to move it yourself. This could cause it to tip over. And remember, the simplest and safest solution is to get down and push.
When you're in a situation where mobile scaffold can be used, it can save you time and give you a lot of freedom on the job. Compared to building and dismantling conventional scaffold systems, the few extra safety precautions required by mobile scaffolding are well worth it.